Good evening, everyone. Or, sorry, not evening, morning. It is about 11:30 here on a Saturday. Another beautiful day here on Mid-Coast Maine. Great times with the weather, and so hope people are getting to go out and enjoy this great weather. And hopefully this awesome stretch of weather will last for quite a while. We've been pretty fortunate. We had some super hot weather last month, and now it's been, I guess, what you could say is like quote unquote normal Maine weather. It was unusually hot for consecutive weeks. It almost felt like months, but it's been really beautiful. I like hot weather. I like the hot climate. I could definitely live in a hot climate year round, and it's funny because with gigs, I play music mostly for a living, and so I was talking about that with a friend the other day, um, and I was like thinking about like some of the gigs I've done and some of the gigs I have still coming up, and I couldn't really think of a gig that I had that was inside. Every gig has been outside pretty much this year, so that's always the thing anyway during the main kind of summer season, for at least for like musicians and things, where there's a lot of extra events because it's an amazing place during the summer, and the tourist season and all that stuff, so there's a lot of activity going on. So but I was thinking of that the other day, and I was like, wow, like I can't really think of the last gig that I had where it was like inside a venue. Everything has been outside, and I think some of it obviously has to do with the pandemic and stuff. But it's still a thing. It's always been a thing anyway. With there being being that we're in a seasonal place, a lot of things are outside. But definitely this year, I can't. Yeah, everything has been outside, and luckily the weather, knock on wood, has been pretty cooperative. There hasn't been too many cancellations because of the weather. There was maybe a little bit in the beginning of the season, but for the most part, the weather's been really nice. So that's been great. But I remember a few weeks ago, I played a gig with a band called Bone Broth with my friend Carl Lazan and Eric Halsey and Ronnie. And that band is a lot of fun. It's all about 90% of that project or that band is improvised, and it's so we kind of make things up in the moment, and it's a cool it's a kind of a cool contrast to the other projects that I plan, because the other projects or bands that I'm kind of involved in are pretty regimented to a degree. It's like very song oriented, and it's about learning all the changes, learning the structures, getting that stuff together, and then performing it. And usually, for the most part, things are set and set in stone as far as the how the tunes are formed, and how things are mapped out. And it's a cool contrast with Bone Broth because we don't really have that. There's a few things that we do in the band now that are a little bit more I guess structured or organized, or that we know what we're going to do. And but now it's a thing of where and also I can't forget Mateo Mendoza, who does who's also part of the band, and he's a rapper. He's really great, and so he's come on board more this year. So, but it's a nice contrast because that stuff is very loose, and we kind of improvise, and kind of somebody will start it off. Maybe Ronnie will start off a riff, or Halsey, or I'll start off a riff, or Cara. So we kind of mix up that kind of interaction, and then that will lead to like some kind of a jam or something. And and it's a creatively, it's like wearing a different hat. You have to really think differently. There's a lot of I feel like sometimes people on the outside of, say, playing music think that playing improvised music is basically, there's not any law to it, or there's not any semblance of structure. And to a degree, I agree with that, but in a lot of ways, it's very much structured in its own way because you really have to, because everything is kind of by the seat of your pants, you really have to, listen to what's going on and really, try to provide that backbone of support so it could hopefully maybe lead into something else. And there's what I like about the improvised element a lot. One of the things that I love about it the most is that there's always a like an element of danger to it. And what I mean by that is that there's a level, there's a high level of where it's really unpredictable. So you're not sure. It's like a blank slate, so you're not sure where things are going to go or what mood things will, go into. So you have to like be pretty vigilant and try to adapt in a moment to everything that's going on. And sometimes, sometimes it works. Sometimes it really works and you can really, it can catapult into this really interesting thing. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it will kind of reel off the tracks a little bit and maybe not really gel. But I like the dangerous element of it. The aspect of it that I love the most is that uncharted territory aspect of where it could go either way and you're trying to react in the moment and you're trying to throw yourself out there a little bit. So in a lot of ways, there there is a lot of structure. There is a lot of real intense listening to what's going on and trying to what I rely on a lot is eye contact and body movements. So I'm always like watching people. I do that in general anyway, but I find in that kind of forum, it's even more of a thing for me to try to, you know, react to what's going on and hopefully do the job of trying to provide that support for what's going on. And the other interesting thing is too, I sometimes think of it where I have about six projects or six bands that I play with regularly. Bone Broth is one, Electric Bonfire, Split Willow, Simplexity, and Quantum. And then I have the Whitehead Dean group, which is our jazz group. So there's about six groups that I play with pretty regularly, and I do occasionally I do some pickup gigs. Like I'll fill in for somebody, but generally it's centered on all of those projects. And the cool thing is, probably about 7 to 10 years ago, I was playing in different bands, but most of the focus all around all of it was really around covers. We were doing lots of other, popular songs from like the '60s or '70s, or real modern contemporary tunes, and that was kind of the focus of everything that was going on, and it was good, and I don't have anything against that. But it was a cool shift in my life about 7 years ago or so, where suddenly I was like focusing on projects and involved with projects that were more original based stuff, where we were performing our own original material. And for me personally, it's just like a preference. I really enjoy that. I love trying to really get into that headspace of doing good original content, because I feel like at the end of the day, like that's the band's calling card or the artist's calling card. Like if they like your stuff and if they if it creates a good memory, or they want to hear it again, that's what you're known for, as opposed to like that's more long lasting, I feel like, in the long run. Some of the projects we still do a little bit of a few covers, but it's pretty small for the most part. It's mostly original stuff. And some of the bands, a couple of the projects in particular, are all original based things. So like Simplexity is all original, and Quantum is all original, and most of Split Willow stuff now is all original. So I really love that. I really get, I really feel like I'm invested in trying to do original material, do original bass stuff a lot more. And it's funny because sometimes I go back and forth with, mostly in the past, not so much now, but I would always think, well, what about one day? Because Quantum, for instance, is my baby, and that's my my favorite thing to do. That's my passion, and I've been doing it for quite a few years now, and it's my outlet, and it's my my little thing, and I really love doing it more than anything else. And I've always thought, oh, what about if I broke away from all of these other projects and just made that you know the 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 main focus of everything, and that kind of thing, and I'd have the time to just do that band. And that's a thing that people do. A lot of artists will break away from these projects or other bands and do their own solo thing and just concentrate on that. And like sometimes it can get crazy with scheduling, trying to navigate through your calendar with bookings and rehearsals and whatnot with when you have other projects. But I really feel like over a few years it kind of evolved for me, where I feel like all these projects that I'm fortunate enough to be playing in are very different from each other, but yet there's all of these similarities to a lot of the material. In each of the bands and each of the projects, there's aspects of the music where there is a lot of improvised things, and there's space and within the structures of the songs that we can kind of improvise. We can improvise, so there's like that kind of thread that ties them all together. And over a period of time, it was really funny because I noticed influences that I was hearing, from playing in these other bands were kind of creeping into what I was doing with Quantum, and particularly around the songwriting. I would hear certain things from like another band I play in. It could be a rhythmic idea or a melodic idea or a vocal idea, and I'd be like, oh wait, that kind of reminds me of this band. This is kind of coming from there. So I kind of evolved to the thought of like, I think what makes Quantum Quantum, whether people like it or not, is because it's a collective or sum of all the parts of all the things that I'm involved in. And I feel like if I didn't have all those projects and all those other things, happening right now, Quantum's sound would be probably really different than where it is right now, and the amount of different influences that I can kind of throw into the band, and it feels like it all like is totally interrelated, and it really helps that group too. And that being said, I love all the projects that I play in. They're all like really fun. They're all like great people. The music's really challenging. It's a lot of work, but it provides that space to where I feel like it's really helped shape Quantum and to develop it. And without having those projects, I don't think it would be the same. I think it would be really different. So sometimes it's a tight balance, but I try to make it work, and I feel fortunate to be in that space. So yeah. And as far as, since I'm kind of talking about Quantum, I mentioned in a couple of videos back that we have a show coming up next week, next Thursday. We'll be playing at Lulu's in Rockland with Quantum at 3 to 6. And usually we do our gigs there on Sundays. We usually do our gigs on Sundays at 2 to 5. But we change the time to kind of try to get the later audience that seems to come in, and people that come by for ice cream, because it's a gelato ice cream place. So there's always this big wave that kind of comes later, early in the day, and then there's like a long lull, and then usually the second half of the last half of our set, like 4 o'clock or 4:30, there's like this big rash of people that come in, and they Ashley see, like, the owner always says that there's like after that point that place is like full on really busy. So she had the idea of making it a little bit later so we could have access or have a even a bigger audience. So we're gonna do that from now on with the remaining shows that we have. and they'll be starting at 3 to 6. So that'll be fun. So come by and check it out. We play about 3 hours, and we just do all original music, and we usually just, you know, kind of gauge the audience. One of the cool other things too that I think about too is recently I played a gig with Electric Bonfire. It's a band I've been playing with for a few years now, and we're a rock band. And we did a gig recently where we played basically all acoustic, and we had never done that before. And basically, the venue, the venue that booked us wanted, they were initially excited, but then when they realized that we're kind of a rock band with electric guitars and full sound system, they kind of got nervous about the volume and like, oh, that might be too much. So they almost canceled the gig. But then thankfully John Luft, who booked the gig, he said, well, we can make a different, we'll set up a different arrangement for it. Maybe we can do all acoustic. And then they were into that, the people who were, booking the show. And then he proposed the idea to us, and then we tried it. We had one rehearsal where we played most of our songs. We only played like an hour or so it was like an hour set. So we tried a rehearsal where we just played all of our material that we've been playing for a while, all acoustic, and it worked out really well. And then so we did the show, and it seemed like it went over pretty well, and it was cool. And I remember saying to John, it's like, and I've always thought that too, that good songs, if they're really good songs, and if they're like, they're from a sincere place, regardless of the instrumentation, whether it's electrified or even acoustic, they, they'll still carry the meaning, and they'll still be strong, and they'll still be just as powerful, because I feel like that's testimony to good music, is that it can be done in any kind of, different shades or with different instrumentation, but the songs are good. They can, kind of transcend that, hopefully. So I've always thought that's kind of a thing that for me, as a source of work ethic, but then as a source of like being able to adapt to different environments. Because some projects, they're either like more full on electric, and they might not be able to adapt to, say, in a venue where there's people like eating fancy dinners or something. But like with the thing with Quantum is that like we when we first started Quantum, it was like kind of a heavy dance kind of thing, and it was very much it had a lot of different influences back then too, but most of our stuff was like kind of heavy duty, like house inspired kind of stuff, and it was like pretty loud and on the more like intense kind of side of things. And then over years, and then when we were playing, especially in the beginning, we usually only played like certain kinds of gigs, like house parties, or like at a place or a venue where there was like a dance crowd, or it was a drinking crowd. So we would just kind of play that kind of style. But then over the years, like I started to really try to incorporate other styles of music into Quantum, because I love all kinds of music, and in particular I was like incorporating more and more influences of music from like ambient music, like Brian Eno, Steve Reich, and then I was really pulling in a lot of influences from a lot of jazz that I listened to, everything from Miles Davis to Bill Evans, whatever what have you. So I was listening to a lot of that stuff. So I started pulling a lot of that music also into the Quantum thing. And I realized that we started, like, sonically and texturally, we were having a little bit more of a diverse sound. And some of the stuff was way more on the ambience spectrum of things, like more mellow and chilled, kind of chilled out kind of stuff. And pretty minimalist. But then we also had the kind of the heavier stuff. And I noticed, like, at that time, we started getting calls to do gigs at, like, kind of restaurant settings, or maybe like when we first start the night, there'd be people sitting and dining and eating and stuff and drinking, and then after that, the bar crowd would kind of come in. So at first it was hard because we'd go in, we'd play like the heavier stuff, and it wasn't really working. It would be too loud. I couldn't really adjust to it. So then I reworked on a lot of the stuff and built these different sets of where we could start with real kind of stripped down ambient stuff and kind of build it up, and then over time we did that a lot, and it was like, okay, this will work. Like we can get away with playing. We can, if we had an opportunity to play a gig, we had the opportunity. We could do it, play stuff that's in a more, kind of ambient, mellow vibe, but then also have the heavier stuff if we needed it, the more high energy aspect of the music. And I found too it was a really great learning experience because suddenly it felt like, you know, sonically and texturally we had like more diverse kind of pool of music to choose from. And over time, like at first it was really hard, but over time we kind of adjusted to being able to play gigs that were, in that setting, like, and we could gauge and read the crowd, like if people were eating or they were just drinking, or maybe the people would be really into it, or maybe people would be just kind of like we'd be in the background, and maybe people wouldn't be into it. So we would just kind of gauge and throw tunes in as the vibe was becoming a part of the venue or the concert. So we were able to adapt to that, to playing in different locations and in different settings. And I feel like that was a really great learning experience for me to be able to do that. Like I remember we played, one of the coolest gigs we played a gig in Montreal once, which was like this music festival, and it was in this big gorgeous theater, and we played like a lot of the heavier tunes, and we played a lot of house parties and like venues like that where we could just play loud and just do our thing. And then, but I love that we can play those kinds of gigs, but then we can also play, like we did a gig on the 4th of July where it was this super low-key, very mellow kind of setting, and we played after this jazz group that was playing. It was through Bay Chamber, and it was a thing that my buddy Mike White had put together. And it was an older crowd there, and it was early in the day, and it was definitely like a very mellow vibe, but they were paying us good to do it, and we wanted to do it. And so we were able to play a set of just like more mellow ambient stuff, and it seemed like it went over pretty well. And I love that over time we were able to develop that adaptability to the venue and to what's going on. So, but anyway, so we're going to be doing my friends, pretty much my best friends, Jillian Reed and Daniel Richmond, who live down in Camden. Great friends. They've been a real just incredibly great friends. They've been really supportive of me over the years doing this, this wacky thing that I do with Quantum, and then also the Film Fanatic page. They've always been really, really supportive of that stuff, and just great friends. And so they had this idea of doing a party, like a house party at their house, and at first I thought it was maybe, they were putting me on, it was a joke, and they were thinking of like, yeah, we'll have you over. Come on over to the house and, set up your stuff and do a Quantum set on our deck. And I was like, well, we could do that, but that might be kind of crazy or too much. Like, what's the logistics of that? So I didn't really take them seriously. And then the next day, they had said they'd been drinking a little bit, and, that's when they asked me about this or told me about this idea. And so I was like, okay, it's probably just a joke or whatever. And then the next day that we talked, and they were like totally serious about trying to do this party at their house. And they live right in Camden, and they have this beautiful spot right in Camden by River Ducks ice cream place, and it overlooks the river, and they got this nice bridge, and it's a really beautiful spot. And there's a lot of people like that walk through there. So evidently they were like totally serious. So then I was like, great, I'm down with doing this. So we're gonna be doing that show in a couple weeks in September, and there'll be an event page for that coming up, and it's going to be open to the public. And the thing that I'm really, really excited about with the show is doing my friend Eric Halsey, who is one of my favorite musicians in the area, just an amazing bass player and just a super cool guy. He's going to also be performing at this party, and he's going to be doing a set of his own electronic music. And I've known Halsey for a few years, and I remember the first conversation we had was about like, people doing their own thing, like original material, especially if it's a one-man band kind of thing. And he told me about all the stuff that he's been, that he hadn't been doing, and like all this original music, and where he loops a lot of, tracks and all this stuff. So he has an Instagram page, which is amazing, and he puts all these videos up there. And basically he has like a whole set. So I've been really like wanting to see him do that, kind of trying to encourage him to like, the stuff is pretty awesome, and I think people would really dig it. It's kind of in the vibe of like, it's very electronic based, but it's kind of got a little bit of a vibe. Like it reminds me, he's a really amazing bass player. So it has like a Thundercat kind of vibe, a Flying Lotus kind of vibe, and a little bit of, experimental kind of edge. And it's a little bit out there, but it's definitely like very hip hop kind of, if it has this real hip hop flavor to it. But it's great. It's awesome. So he's going to be playing also at this party. So I'm really, really excited about that. Probably more than anything else, to hear him play and to like, just to have him do it, and play in front of audience, because I really think his stuff will be, once people hear it in that context, they'll take to it. So he's going to be playing also at this party. So within the next day or two, we'll be putting up an event page, for the show. So this will be something that I'm really looking forward to, and I think it will be a really fun time. And we'll basically, we'll do a like Quantum set, and then Halsey will do a set, or vice versa. We'll figure out the order, but it will be fun. It'll be a fun thing, and yeah. So this brings me to this incredible movie. I tried doing a show on this movie probably a while back, but then some stuff came up and I wasn't able to do it. But now I can. Like I've said, I have a little bit of a I have a much better arrangement now and set up here at my house. I can kind of just crank these videos out when I want to, and when I can. I think the setup's better than it was. This is all for my YouTube channel. I have a new microphone that I've been using, that I bought. Basically, like all the other Film Fanatic videos I was doing were basically on my phone, and I was just kind of turning on my phone and doing it that way. But I feel like this quality is a lot better. Got a laptop that's pretty good. I can kind of edit the videos or delete them and do stuff to them if I need to. And I have a YouTube channel now, and then I got this new microphone, so it's been a lot more fun and more at my convenience to do it, a little bit more control. So anyway, this movie, City of the Living Dead, directed by the legendary Lucio Fulci. This is like, this is one of the greatest like horror exploitation films that you will ever see if you've never seen it. And Lucio Fulci is one of my favorite out of most Italian horror films and directors. I would say probably, there's so many great ones. Dario Argento, for instance, is another really well known. He might arguably he probably might be the most well known Italian horror director. Probably most well known for Suspiria, which is like a masterpiece. That was like his first movie I had seen. But I kind of feel like, and there's a bunch of great directors from Italy during and this is all during the period of like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, particularly like the 70s and 80s. There's a whole slew of great directors, but Lucio Fulci is probably my favorite. I've been slowly trying to buy a lot of his movies. And this movie, City of the Living Dead, was my most recent one. I have also The House by the Cemetery. I have Demonia. I have Warriors of 2049. I have a few others, and I'm trying to amass more of his movies. The New York Ripper, which is like a masterpiece. That's one of my favorites. Probably my favorite movie of his that is probably The House by the Cemetery. And again, a lot of these movies, there's a few I haven't seen, but most of these movies, like City of the Living Dead, which actually goes under a different title, The Gates of Hell. City of the Living Dead House by the Cemetery, The New York Ripper, and a handful of other movies I remember seeing as a kid when I was a little kid and on in the days of VHS, going into the video rental store. They all had these like gruesome and amazing covers, and I remember always renting them as a kid, and they were like just amazing. And now with this amazing kind of golden age of cinema that we're living in, they're like releasing all of these like amazing films. So I've been really trying to accumulate as many as I can, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been super fun, and there's also like he has Lucio Fulci probably has something like 70 to 100 films, and there's quite a few of his films I have not seen. But on the more popular fringe of his films, like The New York Ripper and City of the Living Dead and House by the Cemetery and a handful of others, those were like movies that I saw when I was a kid. So I'm trying to snatch those up and check out a lot of other ones. One of the other terms you hear a lot about too is it's a style of film or a film reference called giallo, and giallo is basically movies that have that real distinct kind of Italian flavor to them. They're kind of low budget. There's a lot of the acting is dubbed. The voiceover is dubbed. Some of the acting is not so great, and the cinematography is usually like just like absolutely amazing. And considering where a lot of these films were done for such a low budget, and they're definitely in the kind of exploitation realm. They were designed to kind of like emulate some other movies that were maybe more popular, and they also have a real heavy horror element, science fiction element, and they're kind of on the more fringe of like being kind of more strange as far as not conventional in a lot of ways. So like the term giallo is kind of a reference to that. Like if a film has like that kind of Italian 70s vibe to it, it's like referred to as like giallo. And a lot of the great directors, some of them are still alive. Like I said, Dario Argento is one that's probably the most well known. Mario Bava, Lucio Fulci is my favorite. We'll be talking about this movie. Bruno Mattei is another one. And there's actually a ton. There's like 30 or 40 different directors, but those are guys that I generally into and that I'm more familiar with. And yeah, this movie came out in I think 1982, City of the Living Dead. And I bought this maybe a couple months ago, and I've watched it a few times since then. And it's just incredible. Like, it's so timeless, and the amount of gore and the violence in this film is just like pretty staggering, and it's kind of shocking, and kind of like The New York Ripper, which is like one of my favorite films of all time, and definitely one of my favorite Lucio Fulci movies. Where that one is more like a little like a real sleazy kind of an experience because of the sexual element, but the gore factor in City of the Living Dead is just astounding. And one of the coolest things about all of these re-releases of all of his films, they're just packed with like just an incredible amount of information, like about his career and his life. And I've reviewed a couple of his other films on this channel, on Film Fanatic, and that's one of the things. Like, each movie I've gotten, over the last few months that I've been slowly trying to buy most of his work on Blu-ray. Each disc like doesn't pull any punches as far as like the special features. Like, they really there's so much great film knowledge on these in these packages, and it's really great. And the transfer of a lot of these classics, like considering when I was a kid watching this stuff, sometimes on cable, but generally it was on like VHS, and the quality wasn't really great. But to see these movies on the Blu-ray, even 4K, where they're just remastered, the sight and sound is just unbelievable. It's just amazing that they're getting that. You know, these movies are getting these like super low budget, you know, exploitation movies are just getting this amazing treatment, and it's wonderful. And you know, I remember reading stories that Lucio Fulci always had this. Well, it's interesting. He worked with a lot of the same actors, and throughout his career, he used a lot of the same leading ladies, and also like this same. A lot of the times, he used a lot of the same principal screenwriters. So he had like a crew of people that had a sense of loyalty to him, and he also had loyalty to them. So they were working together for many years. But he also like had this reputation of being kind of a tyrant and kind of being a bastard a little bit, where he had this like, you know, sadistic side to him where he would, you know, purposely, you know, put his actors through hell to like get a shot. There's like one scene, for instance, there's one scene in City of the Living Dead where there's a scene where all of the actors and actresses are like covered in maggots, and there's like this giant fan that they used in that for the scene where these maggots are all being blown on them, and he used all real live maggots, and it's like a really grotesque, horrible scene, but amazing. And he actually like would put glue on the actors and actresses so these maggots would actually stay, you know, on their body. And so he would do all of these things that were just like pretty gross. And you know, now if that was a thing, they would probably use CGI, but he used like a lot of real practical effects. And there's like stories of that scene, say, or, you know, about that very scene in here where they talk to different actors and actresses about that, and he would get this like real sadistic pleasure out of seeing these actors being so, you know, so uncomfortable and feeling disgusting because they were having to do these scenes. So he would really push the envelope, and so he's kind of got that side to him, or he had that real sadistic side to him, where he would kind of laugh at like what he would have to, or some of the things he would do to his actors to get the shot. So yeah, super funny. But at the end of the day, I mean, he just, you know, I really feel like Lucio Fulci was like legitimately an amazing director, one of the best, one of the greatest directors. You know, even outside of the realm of like say the exploitation world, where you know typically his stuff was very low budget, some of the acting was terrible, but he just had such an incredible vision as a director, and I feel like outside of that realm or that kind of or that genre, I feel like he was legitimately an amazing director. I feel like he was right up there, you know, with like other, you know, maybe well, you can kind of consider like highbrow directors like say Akira Kurosawa or Stanley Kubrick, Francis Ford Coppola, you know, directors like that made more like kind of high end work. You know, were like really good acting and really great production, and you know, it was pretty flawless. But I feel like Lucio Fulci was so great that even though he directed in a very different way and more or less in a very different style and very much, you know, in this underground style, I felt like he's on that same, you know, he's in that same class of those guys because he was just such a visionary director. But again, you get a chance. This is one of the greats. Shocking violence, a great. It's essentially a ghost story zombie movie. It's got so many great elements, but amazing movie. City of the Living Dead. So this is Jason Dean from Film Fanatic. I'm gonna be signing off. Thanks again for checking out the page and the video. Get a chance, like and subscribe, please, and we will see you soon. Cheers.